Hello and good afternoon or good morning, everyone. I'm Oscar Parriabello, your Senior Economic Justice Correspondent here at Next City, and I'm here to welcome you all to our webinar today, The Planet Isn't Waiting, How Climate Financing Entities Are Moving Forward in the Face of many of the obstacles that they faced, especially in the past 8 months. Before I introduce our panel, just a few housekeeping notes. First of all, although this is a virtual event, before we get started, I just wanted to acknowledge that Next City is based in Philadelphia on the traditional ancestral unceded land of the Lanai and Lenape people. And I'm based in New York City, which is on the land of the Munsee Lenape people. And I particularly live in Manhattan, in Washington Heights, right next to what used to be one of the oldest trade routes. Today we call it Broadway. Um, so if you want to find your acknowledgement, we'll send your own land acknowledgement or where you are coming from. You can go to the link we'll send in the chat. And yeah, as in addition to that, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them to the Q&A function. And you can submit them at any time, and I'll be going through those as the webinar goes along. I'll have a few questions to get us started, but we'll really have an open conversation with everyone to submit questions as they come up, as they feel so inspired. And yeah, but again, before we get started too, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat, say where you're coming from. And it's really the end of summer, so I think I still have the right to ask if you can tell us what your favorite ice cream flavor is. If you don't like ice cream, then some other summer desserts or treats. Um, yeah. So let's see, make sure that is all the housekeeping notes. Yes. So yeah, I'm going to bring up our speakers. Today we're coming from three of the greenhouse gas reduction fund financing entities. They're all coming from different networks or represent networks that have come together over the past few years, really. So Netta Arab Shahi, their full bios are are on the webpage. I'm not going to read them completely, but yes, we have Netta Arab Shahi from the Inclusive Center for Resiliency and Clean Energy. Amir Kirkwood, the CEO of the Justice Climate Fund, and Beth Bafford, the CEO of Climate United. Um, and yeah, we're going to start by just asking about these networks that I just mentioned, because the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, obviously, it isn't the only climate investment program that the federal government has put forth over the past several years or decades. There's solar tax credits, all kinds of other programs, but this one in particular, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, was a $20 billion program created by the Inflation Reduction Act. And we're not going to talk so much about the lawsuit today, or the legal battle over those $20 billion. The Trump administration has been trying to claw it back almost since before it was even in office. And there have been lawsuits filed to try to get those funds released. Those funds are technically sitting in a bank account right now at Citi. And almost all of them have basically been frozen, and they're not moving out into these projects or into the programs that we're going to talk about today. That said, I know just from my own reporting, following around some of the groups that I've talked to over the past few years, small credit unions, community banks, CDFI loan funds, other capital providers. And I know that there's been so much work put in, even just to prepare to get those $20 billion out onto the ground into projects, through various lenders and institutions all over the country. And so that's what we're going to start talking about today. And we're gonna learn a little bit about why it's important to support these locally owned, locally controlled financial institutions to put out not just the $20 billion, but also all of the private dollars that were going to be leveraged alongside that. The number I've seen most often is 1 to 5. So for every dollar from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, there's going to be around an average of $5 in private sector funds leveraged alongside those dollars, or leveraged with the support of the $20 billion from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So we're going to talk a little bit about how that works and what is still possible, or what's happening now, even with that $20 billion in legal limbo for the time being. So I want to bring up Netta first to talk about the Inclusive Center for Climate Resilience. Excuse me, the Inclusive Center for Resiliency and Clean Energy. And tell us a little about Inclusive, the organization, your members, your network, and what you've been doing. I think it was 5 years ago, or almost 6 years ago now, you launched this center. So Netta, take it away for us.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Oscar and Nexity, for having us here today. And thanks so much to everyone for being here to participate. So I am Neda Arab Shahi. I head Inclusive Center for Resiliency and Clean Energy. Inclusive is a 50-year-old nonprofit organization. We have the mission to help low and moderate income people and communities achieve financial independence through credit unions. And as part of that work, we're also a certified community development financial institution, or CDFI intermediary. We invest directly into credit unions in our CDFI capacity. So, um, through both the programmatic work and the investment activities, we support a network of over 500 credit unions across the country. And we saw for many years that the credit unions and their communities and their members were struggling with access, affordability, and sort of the know-how to participate in the clean energy transition. And we saw that being a concern both for paying utility bills, but also for climate resiliency. And we launched our Center for Resilience and Clean Energy to help provide community lenders with the training and the technical assistance needed to bring affordable, accessible clean energy and energy efficiency financing to their communities. So we saw in 2019, a few of our credit union members and a few community lenders had been quite active in clean energy lending, but most were not. We partnered with the Center for Impact Finance at the University of New Hampshire and built a training and technical assistance program. And since then, have been just seeing tremendous growth in the commitment and the lending activities in this space from community lenders all over the country. Um, Oscar, should I keep jump into the CCIA program or back to you?
Well, I mean, I think if you could give us a sense net of the kinds of loans that your members, you already seen your members do, even
Mhm,
before, from the very at the beginning in 2019, 2020. At that point,
mhm,
and how has it evolved? Is it just, and how many more new lenders, or not new lenders, but existing lenders have you helped bring into this space
mhm.
over the past 5 years?
Yes. So the joint program with Center for Impact Finance at University of New Hampshire, together with Inclusive, we have trained over 1,000 lending professionals from um, 650, we're probably closer to 700 community lending institutions in that time. So
Mhm.
we have seen most of those launch clean energy lending programs, or if they already had a program, they may have grown it or found ways to make sure that they can keep it alive, because sometimes markets change and possibilities change, and we've
Mhm.
helped them to navigate those changes. And then what we've seen is that those lenders have really started to um, kind of build local markets that then create a positive feedback loop for many other players have entered those markets. They focused
Mm.
on solar, solar plus battery storage, both for residential single family homes and also for multifamily homes and small. small businesses, small commercial properties. And then also energy efficiency improvements, other kind of technology improvements like moving to geothermal, moving to sort of newer climate and resiliency
Hmm.
equipment or technology like floodproofing or
Yeah.
fireproofing homes, and then also financing for electric vehicles, both just cars, and then also business vehicles, service vehicles,
Hmm.
bicycles, etc. I
Yeah.
think those have been the main kinds of projects
Okay.
that have been financed.
Yeah. And one more follow up for now before I jump to Amir. Just the 700 lenders that you mentioned that you've helped train, the institutions. Um, can you give us a sense of, they're all in urban areas? Are they also in, smaller cities, even rural areas?
They are located in a combination of rural and urban and suburban areas. They're really all
Hmm.
over the country, and their reach is they lend kind of collectively. They lend in all 50 states. They also lend in
Hmm.
Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and also in actually in Guam. They are um, typically, what's common, across all those lenders is that they really understand their own community, and so we've designed supports that guides them in how to create a program that uses their own expertise about their community to offer loan products and also kind of other support in accessing clean energy, how to connect with the right contractors or developers or installers, for example. But it's
Hmm.
really using their own expertise to tie into and serve their communities.
Great. Thanks, Netta. Let me jump to Amir. A similar question, tell me a little bit about Justice Climate Fund. And, it's not, it's a new entity or a new purpose-built entity, we should say, to do this work, but it represents two older established networks of lenders that have been mission driven, supporting mostly locally controlled financial institutions for many decades. So tell us a little bit about the network that you're working with and some of the kinds of loans or projects, programs that the institutions in those networks are building.
Absolutely. Thank you, Oscar and Netta and Beth. Good to see you all. Justice Climate Fund, as you mentioned, was really born of an effort by a series of networks of community development finance organizations with a real intent of ensuring that the efforts around community development finance were as inclusive as possible of as many diverse developers, diverse CDFIs, minority depository institutions, credit unions, as many, bringing that world together in a way to ensure that capital really was equitable. When the opportunity came along under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and the IRA for that group to apply for funding, to bring clean energy financing to communities, they formed what is now called the Justice Climate Fund. And the Justice Climate Fund's real intent was to win funding under the clean energy, under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, in order to deploy capital through those networks of community lenders. Um, and ultimately, there were five networks that kind of make the Justice Climate Fund today, the distribution channel of intended projects. The African American Alliance for CDFI CEOs, National Association for Latino Community Asset Builders, OISTA Corporation, the National Bankers Association, and the Community Development Bankers Association. Together, amongst those five organizations, there were well over 1,200 lenders and sort of lenders, developers, and others as a part of that network. As we continued to move along in the process under the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and particularly under the CCIA program, which we were awarded funding, uh, we were really focusing on about 300 of those community lenders who were best equipped with both projects and capacity to be able to finance projects that qualified under the CCIA program. If you think about the split of the type of projects, they were clearly about maybe two-thirds of them would have been distributed energy generation or storage, and about a third of them would have been net zero emissions buildings. But
Mm.
within that two categories, there were a lot of permutations of what it looked like that really reflected the communities in which those lenders operated and the needs at the ground level for those communities. So some of it was multifamily energy efficiency retrofits. There was residential solar. There were even mush deals, sort of the classic municipal transactions, commercial real estate transactions, and particularly a lot of commercial real estate that was tied to community facilities, healthcare, education, all of those groups. So the impact, as you heard with Netta and you're going to hear with Beth, was going to be broad in terms of what we were all collectively hoping to utilize that capital for. Going forward, I think we found that there's still, similar to what Netta was saying, there's still a strong demand at the community level for financing for clean energy projects. After things started to go sideways with the federal government, we stepped back at at the Justice Climate Fund and said, if there's no GGRF, what does it look like to have community-based clean energy lending? And what we found was that among that network, there was still close to $1 billion of deal pipeline that needed some degree of concessionary financing, but weren't in need of the deep subsidy or significant amounts of technical assistance to get there. So what we've been focusing our energy on is how do we get that gap met through non-traditional financing sources or traditional financing sources. And, the nice thing about it is that uh, each month we look at that same pipeline and it doesn't seem to move negatively. It seems to be moving positively. Community lenders are trying to figure out how to get deals done. They're adjusting pricing where pricing matters. They're looking at their own terms for how they lend. And, while it's not what we intended or what we hoped, the positive thing is that the commitment has not gone away.
Mhm. That's great. And Amir, if I may kind of call upon your bio a little bit, so I know that you've worked in different CDFI banks previously,
Yes.
locally owned, locally controlled institutions, working mission-driven institutions doing this work. So if I could ask you to talk a little bit about what it is about the network of institutions that Netta also touched on it about knowing the contractors, bringing in those minority or women-owned contractor firms to do some of this work. What is it about this network of institutions that you've been building, that Ed has been building, that Beth has also been building? I mean, what is it about these institutions that makes them particularly suited or able to bring in those contractors versus just any old bank?
Yeah, I think it's that these banks, as you mentioned, I was prior to this, I was the CEO of Locus, community bank based out of Richmond, Virginia. And during the time I was there, I saw the solar platform grow from about $10 million in loans to about 50 million. So roughly about 10% of the overall book by the time I left. And the reason that that happened is that CDFIs, minority depository institutions, they all just figure out how to leverage all the resources is the best way I put it. So a deal may go to market and it has a little bit of, state tax credits. It may have some federal tax credits. It probably figured out how to get a grant. And obviously it's using the deposit base of that institution in order to get it done. And while and so that ability to look to multiple sources to build a capital stack for a transaction, I think is step one. Step two is the closeness, usually of all the actors in the institution to the decision making. So again, when I was running the bank, decisions were made that involved the board of directors on loans and not just on exceptions to policy, but some loans that were not exceptions to policy, largely because the board wanted to just understand the risk and impact of the lending as much as anyone else did. And then the third thing to me is just the obvious issue of the if not, then who's going to do it element of it that comes from being a community lender. Um, while we partner, all CDFIs partner with institutional money, often that institutional money can't make the loans, can't get to the economics to make a transaction make sense at a community level. And that's where the CDFIs, the community development credit unions, the others in this network all come in, because we can bridge between what institutional money cannot do and what the community needs.
Okay, great. Thanks, Samir. And let me call on Beth now from Climate United. Beth, tell us a little bit about your entity is also a purpose-built entity, but it was built by organizations with long experience in community development, in affordable housing and commercial real estate. Um, what Tell us about the sort of network of institutions, developers that you've built at Climate United, which is a little bit more of a Frankenstein's monster of an entity versus the other two. It's sort of there's things here that involve electric trucks and all kinds of other little markets you're looking to create. So tell us about the networks you built, Beth, and what kinds of activities, projects were they looking to support?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Oscar. And it's great to be on with this crew. So Climate United is a consortium of three organizations that have been around for decades, looking at how to support economic development and opportunity for under-resourced communities in the US and globally. It's a partnership of three national nonprofit organizations, Calvert Impact, and Climate United is a subsidiary of Calvert Impact. Community Preservation Corporation, which focuses on multifamily affordable housing, and Self-Help Ventures Fund, which is a family of organizations, two credit unions, a loan fund, and an advocacy policy organization under the kind of self-help brand. And we really came together to create what we call a multi-segment strategy that could look at the focus areas of the program, and meet the needs at all different for all different types of people and communities. So we looked at how we meet consumer needs through the work that self-help does, similar to what Netta mentioned, looking at how consumers and families are interacting and intersecting with clean technologies in their homes and their vehicles, and in their local communities, looking at multifamily affordable housing and the work that CPC has pioneered for decades to really bring down operating costs by investing in efficiency and electrification and solar access for multifamily buildings. And then leaning on Calvert Impact's experience in a lot of the other kind of non-residential segments, looking at clean transportation, community solar, schools and school buildings, school buses, looking at other community infrastructure, really trying to understand how we could support a broad swath of types of technologies, and the benefits that they drive. And I think what going into the network that we built, which was, in some ways overlapping and intersecting with Netta and Amir's networks, is really looking at the institutions that at the end of the day have a mandate to invest and lend into projects that support either economic development or affordability. Right? Those are two things that all of these institutions are built to serve. Economic development in terms of business creation, running businesses, growing businesses, local manufacturing, job creation, right? All these institutions are set up to do that, looking at affordability in housing, in healthcare, in childcare, in energy costs. And when you look at who is best positioned to lend to, invest, and as Amir said, kind of put together the mind-numbing capital stacks that are required to get these projects done, it's the local lending institutions that know how to do that. And there's really, when you look at the kind of core purpose of their work and the purpose of the program, right, there's not as clear of a line as folks tend to think of between community and economic development and clean energy and clean technologies. It's the same it's different ways to get to the same ends in terms of job creation, manufacturing, business growth, and affordability across the spectrum. And I think we're seeing that even more acutely today than when the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund was passed, in terms of the importance of looking at energy affordability and energy access and reliability with a very stressed grid. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Amir said, the pipeline is still growing, because this is an acute problem. It's an acute need in communities across the country. And when business owners, when communities, when schools, when nonprofits have problems like this and need projects to get done, they go to their local lender to get them done. They are the local problem solvers that can figure out how to get from point A to point B to bring those benefits locally. And so that is a big part of the reason that we work with a lot of that network, that we've lent to a lot of that network for 30 years at Calvert Impact, and our partners have done so as well. It is really the institutions that are critical to be local problem solvers, to get stuff done, and deliver those benefits to their communities, because they're the ones that are set up to care. And unfortunately, the rest of our financial system has structural challenges that no longer allow them to play that local problem-solving role, which has created an even greater need for these institutions on the ground.
Mhm. And that's follow up for you. So the two, Netta and Amir, are working on programs that will sort of invest kind of directly into the institutions themselves. But Climate United is going to be working its work plan, whether or not it has greenhouse gas reduction fund or not. The plan is a little bit different, and it's structured to do something else. It's more about the secondary market vehicles, loan purchasing, loan participations. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that supports the network of lenders that you build? Some of them are actually going to be grantees from Inclusive, from Neto, from Amir. They'll invest in those grantees. Those grantees will be able to do more work, and you'll be able to come in and support them. How? Can you talk about the how?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two different programs that our organizations were awarded funds through. So Amir and Netta were awarded funds through the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator. That program was specifically set up to provide essentially capitalization grants, equity grants to lending institutions in order for them to be able to finance projects in their backyard. The program that we were awarded through is called the National Clean Investment Fund program. And that program was set up essentially as national green financing infrastructure, meant to support the various needs of projects, developers, operators, and lenders in the ecosystem. Because as we all know, who've been working in this space for a long time, not everybody needs the same thing at the same time. And the barriers to growth, or the barriers to get projects done, differ depending on the different context of the project or the work or the place. And so it was really meant to be a complement to provide equity support to balance sheets in order for folks to either develop or grow their green lending, their clean technology lending programs, but also then be able to access various financial tools to continue or expand that growth. And so for us, that was in three flavors. We were doing some direct, kind of highly structured deals where the brain damage was high enough that other financial institutions were not willing to do it, but we thought there was a really clear market transformation or kind of market expansion argument. Two, we were investing directly into lenders who could then use that liquidity to do more projects. So basically leveraging some of the equity they were getting through the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator program to provide liquidity to do more deals. And then third was to purchase standardized products. So look at where there were markets that were more ready for standardization, that could start to leverage the secondary markets for kind of better priced liquidity, and access the secondary markets in order to further expand for anything that could be standardized and sold. So looking at that for green mortgages, single family mortgages, and multifamily mortgages, looking at the CPACE market, the commercial property assessed clean energy market, and building out the secondary market there. which Calvert Impact has experience in, really looking at where there are markets that are at that maturity level that we could help scale while continuing to build the patterns and recognition to eventually get to a secondary market for some of the non-standard assets that a lot of community lenders are active in doing. And so it's really set up to be multiple tools in the toolkit, depending on what was needed, in the market at that time. And I think that's one of the things that people don't really kind of hasn't fully set in, is just the importance from a policy perspective of this kind of institution, the market supporting clean energy adoption. Because, at the end of the day, the program was built with the recognition that the clean energy transition is happening, but who is benefiting from that transition is unequal. And I think that is the purpose of this program, to take the tax credits, to take the incentives, to take all these other amazing things that were in the IRA that are now getting wound down, but to ensure they are being adopted with people, places, communities across the country that otherwise we're going to be kind of at the back of the line in terms of clean energy adoption, and really should be at the front. And so that takes flexibility. It takes being a part of the market. It takes being reactive to the market in order to make sure that we're solving the right problem at the right time to get us to that long-term goal. And most government programs aren't set up like that. Most are much more prescriptive. And so that flexibility built in was really a critical part of the design.
Yeah. In a way, what you were building in terms of the secondary market pieces, or it's sort of like the Fannie Mae or the Freddie Mac for this kind of work. Is that right? In terms, like, today we can look and say Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are responsible for a majority of residential mortgage lending that happens in any given year today. That happens through private lenders who then sell the loans to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And so you were looking for lenders like the ones in your network, or some of them are the same ones at Meta and we are building. You were looking for them to make the loans, and then you were going to purchase some of those loans in the same way that Fannie or Freddie would.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it was learning from Fannie and Freddie what's worked and what hasn't worked in that structure, to understand how we address and serve the markets that we were trying to serve. I think there are some things that were relevant and translatable, some things where standardization is not always the answer and possible. And so thinking about different structures where we could kind of see what's worked in those markets, what hasn't, where people have gotten left behind, and figure out how to address those markets again, and kind of in the right way with the right tools. But certainly meant to provide kind of national infrastructure in a way that is similar to the purpose of those entities.
Right. Thanks, Beth. All right. So before I ask my next question to the group, let me just first remind folks that yes, we are recording this webinar, and we will share the webinar video. It will be available at nextcity.org/webinar within a few days after today. So I'm going to jump ahead to an audience question here because I think it does tie in right to this question of the institutions that you're all working with. The question is, what is available in terms of the very immediate, or as close to immediate as possible, in terms of resources to fund projects that are going to close in the next 4 to 5 months. The networks you built, are there lenders available? Obviously we can't necessarily speak to like specific cities or markets, but like, yes, are there lenders around who are looking and able to close deals in the next 45 months? I don't know if Netta or Amir, you want to jump on that question first in terms of the networks you have.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump right in. The simple answer is yes. Remember, what GGRF was doing was providing subsidy fundamentally for deals. It was not the sole driver of the pipeline itself. So all of the lenders in our network are still trying to identify ways to finance deals. They're open for business. They're banks and they're loan funds. They have to make loans. So they weren't allowed to fall apart because the federal government decided to move away from a policy. If this is being asked by a specific developer, I would suggest you get in touch with either the Inclusive Network, you can get in touch with Justice Climate Fund, you can get in touch with any of the networks that are underneath the Justice Climate Fund, and they can help you identify a bank that is in your relevant market that might be able to provide financing. You still want to take advantage of the fact that they are all local lenders. So if you're sitting in, Savannah, Georgia right now, you want to be working with either, one of the local green banks, local credit unions, or local CDFIs of that market.
Yeah. Anything
Yeah,
to add, Dana?
yeah, absolutely. So, I have a little bit of like stats on where our network is with this. With our CCIA program, as Beth mentioned, we were building a grant pipeline, and we saw that there were close to 300 credit unions that informed us they were ready to apply for those grants, ready to start deploying their own existing deposit capital, which they're required to lend um, to projects. And so those nearly 300 credit unions are across 42 states and 3 territories. They have $255 billion in assets, and they directly provide financial services to 16 million residents, in across all those states and territories. And for the CCIA application that they made to us for grants, they had committed collectively nearly $1.2 billion of their own institutional capital to finance clean energy projects. And as I mentioned, many of those lenders, they do consumer and single family residential lending, but some of them also do finance projects like community solar or multifamily, at whole building energy retrofits, et cetera. And so I'll put our kind of our contact email in the chat for anyone who'd like to reach out. But there are definitely lenders across that network that continue to finance projects, and they are many of them are trying to figure out how they can support as many projects as possible between now and the end of the year. Excuse me. Um, so as to take advantage of any remaining incentives that will run out at the end of the year.
And Oscar, I know we're not going into kind of detail on the lawsuit, but just for folks'
Mhm.
awareness, right? I mean, I think we are not giving up on access to the funds that are sitting in our bank accounts.
Yeah.
That is a process that is still underway. We're still fighting for on behalf of everybody who was expecting, hoping in process and pipeline for these dollars. And so, I think the question I think is more when than if. We will get access to these funds at some point in some shape or form. It's just going through the various options on the legal side. And so just want everybody to be crystal clear that as we think about the path forward and pushing forward, we are all trying to creatively think about how to make forward progress while also continuing to push to get access to the funds that are legally ours.
Mhm. And is there also a sort of a hotline or an interest form or some entry point to your network, Beth, or is it more just thinking about, so should folks just think about reach out to a local credit union, a local bank? If it's more on the commercial side, probably more a local bank or a CDFI that would do more commercial or multifamily stuff. Is it just reach out to those groups and there's a network of those, hundreds of them across the country. We've heard about them already, who are just sort of, they know to call you or to call Amir or call Netta if they need help finding subsidy for one of these projects.
Yeah, and I think we used to have a form on our website, but certainly if our job right now is to figure out how we can push forward access capital to push forward on projects. We can't do everything that we were hoping until funds are accessible, but certainly still trying to move forward. So feel free to reach out. And if we can't do it ourselves, happy to think through partners or ways to connect you to the right source. I will say that subsidized, kind of, I just saw the chat, subsidized, very below market capital is really tough to access right now. There's a lot of sectors of the economy that are struggling with the changes in policy, and so philanthropic actors are overstretched, and state and local governments are overstretched. So we're trying our best to create pathways to access capital, but also need to work within the private markets as well to get stuff done. So not perfect, not what we'd hoped, not where we thought we'd be at this point last year, but all still pushing forward as much as we can to get good work done.
And maybe we can talk about this question about affordable housing. Developers are looking for affordable housing, looking for flexible below market financing to implement sustainability measures. Could I ask maybe Amir or Netta or Beth, really, any of you, can you talk us through like what one of these transactions looks like, and how your financing would come in, setting aside the lawsuit for now, even with the potential for alternative funding sources to step in the meantime. How does that work? And how much of it are you able to do? Are you hoping to be able to do even by the end of this year? Sorry, the question is, how are you planning to provide support that allows for below market financing of some of these projects? And for now, is it slower, or are you changing how you plan to work for the time being, or is it just a matter of just time, unfortunately giving more time, which I know is money, but how does it work on a transaction kind of level, or does it work does it go all the way down to that kind of level when it comes to how you work?
I'm happy to speak to a brief example and then maybe
Yeah.
pass to Amir. Okay. So one example, especially thinking about affordability and achieving a below market project, is, as Beth said, funds are more constrained. Funds are harder to access in kind of across the board, and challenges are also greater. So, but what we're seeing is some really creative approaches. For example, one of our credit unions has continued to be really committed to helping their community members transition to lower carbon, lower utility bills. So they've been able to procure a grant themselves. They've also identified some state and city grant funds, and also some sort of technical assistance for consumers that's available in their city. And they've also connected to Inclusive, and we've connected them to equipment manufacturers that are able to provide below market rate, below, I think potentially even below cost equipment, and connect them to installers that are kind of connected and trained by that manufacturer. So we see kind of the entire value chain covered, from um, the um, the credit union raising some grant funds, so philanthropy, plus some local incentive programs, plus the actual manufacturer getting involved, providing below market equipment, and then to close that out and make sure that the borrowers can actually access the projects, the credit union is providing below market interest rate loans as well. And so that's we're seeing, and I wish I could say more of the details. I know I'm being very vague, but we're seeing several different credit unions across the country put the effort and the time, it's very time intensive to put together that kind of financing where it's blended and it's that certainly requires upfront coordination across a lot of different entities, but then the end result is the consumer can access a project that is actually going to lower their energy bills and actually going to set them up for kind of a more reliable and efficient um, ho- home and also household budget.
Hmm.
So that's one example
Yeah.
that's in the works right now.
And Amir, I think you touched on this too in your earlier response, but I mean, are you seeing your lenders also do similar things for commercial projects or larger multifamily projects?
Yeah, I can just give you an example. Something that's really important for a number of our community lenders, our community resilience hubs. For example, there's one in Georgia that one of our lenders is working on, where essentially it would produce about 2 megawatts total portfolio across 12 of these resilience hubs to provide solar and battery storage. Essentially, it's driven by community facilities such as churches or other sort of education, YMCA type of community-based facilities. The benefit, obviously, is that by scaling and bringing each of those together into one sort of portfolio financing, you can kind of improve the deal economics. You can kind of streamline the process because you can imagine individually doing that with each community facility is just kind of time intensive. From a lender's perspective, it's underwriting intensive. So again, the approach is to really bring these community facilities together from a kind of a hub strategy in order to really maximize that financing. What we've noted on the project is that right now there's a projected decrease of energy cost of about 30% as a result of the aggregation and being able to scale the financing together. The ability to sort of distribute that energy to residential uh, as well as the community facilities themselves. And I think there's like a connectivity also that just comes from knowing that you can rely on community-based facilities to be the driver of energy efficiency in states where there might not be the strongest relationship with the power companies, or there may be issues of distrust with the power companies, but having a community partner being the lead on resiliency is actually the driver that probably moves uh, it from being a very individualistic process with trust issues sort of always in the residential mind to and small businesses as well, to something where it's a shared value.
Hmm. So, I mean, I think what I'm hearing you both say, and Beth is also kind of saying something similar in that, there are institutions all over the country, these CDFI banks, CDFI credit unions, CDFI loan funds, MDI banks, these are minority banks or credit unions. OISTA, Amir, you mentioned OISTA Corporation earlier. So this is a network of tribal lenders, native lenders
Yes.
working on tribal lanes, which is very complicated and sophisticated and causes lots of headaches, but they've been out there doing it. And the idea is, I think what you're saying is if you're a developer, if you're a business, if you're a homeowner looking to put some solar panels or do some energy retrofits on your home, if you're a low income homeowner, the idea is to find one of these institutions nearby, or if there aren't any, and I do. I've seen maps of them. They are in every state and in most metropolitan areas, many counties. If you can't if you can't find one of these institutions nearby, um, the others that are there, the credit unions that are there that are local, it's almost like you have to tell them to, like, why don't you talk to Netta, talk to Amir, talk to Beth about how to put a deal together that would work on the terms that we need our borrowers to have. If you don't, on the off chance you're in a place that doesn't have a CDFI certified lender around somewhere, or an NDI who isn't already part of one of these networks, um, point them in your direction to start talking about how to do this.
Yeah, I would say because often if you're sitting at the developer level, you actually don't know who the partner is, right? If you
Mm,
drive down the street, you see a Chase sign, a Bank of America sign, and other large institutional lender sign, but you don't see an Optus sign, or you don't see a City First
mm,
Enterprise sign. So it is, that's the reason why these networks were put together, was to help those lenders to figure out how they can also grow their portfolio of opportunities. So, there's always an element to this where I think as the more and more we can be advocates, the better off we are in terms of growing the network and creating opportunities for the network.
yeah. Um, so we're getting to the end here, and I appreciate the questions that are coming in. But there was one last bit I wanted to ask you all about, and that is just alternative funding sources. As you know, even if it's just a stopgap for now, are there any that you've been able to start plugging into some of the infrastructure you've built? Or is your infrastructure you built, the networks, the potential deals, the standardized products you were working on, you've been working on for years, all three of you. Are there any alternative sources that are stepping in or could plug in if they wanted to? Are you sort of set up to just like start doing that? Maybe we'll start with Beth on that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are set up to execute. We were lending when the funds got frozen. We had done our first few deals, and so we have the operational infrastructure, the pipeline partnerships, and talent on our team to push forward for alternative sources of capital. We're mostly talking to private investors at this point, who really care about making progress and moving forward, but also obviously have cost of capital. And so, also interested in ways that state and local governments can plug in, and others who want to see this work get done. Obviously, much more decentralized in its path, but what we care about is progress, and so all of those sources can be plugged in to us and our partners to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, Netta, any thoughts from your end in terms of alternative funding sources, other ways? I know Net Inclusive has been building its own sort of secondary markets work as well, and I'm not sure how much of that was even dependent on GGRF versus other sources of funding.
Mhm. Yes. So Inclusive has a secondary market for clean energy loans. We are secondary market specifically for credit union clean energy loans. And it was not built, it was built before GGRF, and it's not dependent on GGRF. With all of these things, uh, the scale was set to increase dramatically with
Mhm.
everything that IRA was set up to provide. Um, so we do continue to have that secondary market, which is a way that credit unions can really start to increase their loan originations and have a place to offload those loans as needed. um, we also have seen so many different programs, and again, this requires coordination, but we've seen so many different programs at the city, county, and state level across the country that have funding set aside, and now they're thinking about how to repurpose those the funds that were maybe originally set up to leverage GGRF, how to repurpose those to still make them available. So I would say kind of checking in locally to see what's available, which, Oscar, I know you mentioned is really important. And I think there's going to be some opportunities there. And they might even be looking for suggestions from folks in their local community as how best to reallocate those funds.
Yeah. Amir, anything to add on this front? And yeah.
Nothing to add in terms of new investors. I mean, I guess the main point and main learning I've had over the last 6 months is the word patience. Because uh, my thought is that simply there are a lot of investors out there who Uh, if you rewound to 2019 and there was no discussion of an IRA on the horizon, we're deeply committed to trying to figure out how to solve climate issues locally, cared very deeply and got the connection between issues like climate and low income communities, or climate and indigenous communities, or climate and sort of erosion of coastlines, and how that had long-term impacts in certain communities. So that was always there, and it was, I look at it as that was what was leading to a GGRF, not the GGRF created that environment. So part of what we're doing now, I think collectively, is trying to be patient with investors, educate them on why these investments are important, and why, again, the collective effort of groups like Calvert, who have access to the capital markets, and groups like Inclusive, who have networks of lenders, and the Justice Climate Fund, are the right venues to reconnect with those that desire to invest locally that they had. And in a sense, no matter what ultimately we're able to recover from this process with the EPA and with the Department of Justice and all that's going on, we have to keep these investors educated, informed, and passionate, and moving dollars uh, to support the work that we're all trying to collectively lead.
Are there ways for I don't the state, local, municipal or county governments to even plug in and say, okay, tell me what you've got in my jurisdiction, and this is what you're going to do with GGRF. Well, obviously, I don't have 20 billion, or I don't have $2 billion to give you for the whole country, but at least here, whatever your pipeline is or is, let me fund that, at least locally. Yeah.
I think we're all seeing that in all of our individual work, that there is definitely a lot of interest from local government to want to partner with us to solve problems and solve challenges. I think the thing that really makes our networks unique, and the work that we're all doing unique, is that we know that these local governments are not just facing a climate challenge, they're facing, health and human service issues, and education issues, and affordable housing issues that are all being exacerbated by the changes that are going on at the federal level. So where CDFIs and community lenders really, I think, add value is that they've always had that look across the spectrum. They never looked at it just as a house. They looked at it as a home that could be used for multiple purposes. Or we're trying to bring community businesses in because they have a wealth creation opportunity, not just because, we need to up the occupancy in the commercial real estate property. So adding climate to that discussion is a natural part of it. And so that's where I think community lenders have a really big value to go to the local governments and say, hey, look, we've been partnering with you on all these issues all along. Let's just bring it full circle and make sure that climate is a part of the approach that we're taking.
Okay. All right. Well, it's already after 2 o'clock, so and I think we're gonna wrap it up in a minute. But I just want to say, thank you all to everybody for attending today, and for our speakers for taking time out of the busy schedules to do this. These pipelines that we talked about today, they're all working on those things. This is it's slower. Obviously there's $20 billion, or roughly 20 billion, that are still frozen in a bank account at Citibank, and we'll see. The lawsuits are pending. um, but yeah, any just last before we leave, just any last thoughts from our speakers about, where should folks turn to? Who should folks get in touch with, or look, if they've got projects, or if they are one of these lenders and they're not already in your networks, how can they get involved to keep everything moving forward, despite the fact that these dollars are frozen. So I think I'll put Beth on the spot to be first here.
Yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of the things that we talked about in terms of finding financial institution, local, regional, national financial institutions that are still interested in pushing forward and doing this work, and we're all happy to be connectors, and introduce folks where to put the right people in touch. The other thing I'll say is that just, everybody on this call and everybody who's doing this work has their own agency and power to affect change in this way. I mean, I think part of the challenge of the program was that we hadn't had sufficient time to really show the on the ground impact in every corner of the country of what this really means, these investments mean in communities. And for folks, for developers who are trying to get projects done, who need access to these monies, call your local elected officials, tell them why it's important, tell them what the benefits are, tell them why it matters to you and your business and your constituents. Those stories, those voices, that advocacy really matters in this overall picture, and kind of combating this narrative that that clean energy is somehow hurting people or communities, or ugly to look at, or increasing energy costs. Right? All of our voices are the most important to push back against that collectively, and so everybody does have agency in this, to solve this problem, and really wanting folks to understand that power, and leverage it appropriately.
Meta, any last
Um,
thoughts? Yeah.
yeah, very briefly, I completely agree with what Beth laid out and just want to reiterate her earlier point that we certainly have not given up on all the momentum that's been built, all the investment that's been obligated to our organizations and also to the country. And we continue to fight to make sure that um, we do anything we can to bring those dollars and bring those investments into communities all across the country. And I do think anyone who's able to should continue to make it really clear to their communities, their local elected officials, that this is something that's needed and necessary. It's not really optional to not have access to affordable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Nana. And Amir, last thoughts?
Just thank you for having me here and having this forum for all of us to continue this fight that we've been in, and also, advocate for partnership. I think, as Beth said, to continue this work.
All right. Well, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Netta. Thank you, Amir, for being with us today. And thanks to our audience. And yeah, as you said, the recording will be up in a few days. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the summer. Take care, everybody.